Hello, you're listening to the Farming Today This Week podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, more on the impact of the Middle East conflict on farms, the joys of national parks, and a new report into how England's uplands could flourish.
You can have a policy that says we want to reach these broad goals. We trust people who live in this place to know how to do that within their place and then ask them to take that forward.
More on that later. Let's start, though, with a subject we sadly often talk about on this programme, fly tipping. From mattresses dumped in lay-bys to lorry loads of building waste abandoned in farmers' fields, leaving them with the cost of clearing it up, this is a big issue. Government statistics show that local authorities in England dealt with 1.26 million fly tipping incidents in 2024-25. It can also be big business. We've recently reported on at least two large-scale illegal waste sites in Kent and Oxfordshire, where thousands of tonnes of domestic and commercial rubbish were dumped, and the Environment Agency is spending millions of pounds to clear up the mess, saying they do plan to pursue those responsible for payment in due course. Well, this shows how easy it can be for criminals to illegally dump waste at this scale. The Countryland and Business Association says that's partly because the application system to become a licensed waste carrier is flawed. This week, the CLA revealed that it made two bogus applications for licensed waste carrying, one on behalf of a cow called Beau, B-E-A-U, Vine, bovine, and another for a fictitious character called Lorry Load. Both applications were approved by the online system with no checks. Anne Maidment, director of CLA Southwest and owner of Beau the Charolais Cross cow, explained to Anna Hill why they did it.
We wanted to highlight that at present it's so simple to get a waste carrier licence that we feel that criminals are exploiting this and using these licences, which appear completely legitimate, to go on and then fly tip tons of waste in rural communities and in the countryside.
And what does it prove then?
Well, at present, you have the authority in order to charge people to collect their waste. And then what you choose to do in order to then dispose of that waste, you would hopefully take it to an official waste disposal unit. However, we are fully aware, and certainly we can see from the increase in fly tipping figures that we've seen this year, that actually criminals are using that licence as an opportunity to charge people and then probably dispose of the waste in the countryside. Under the current system, all that is needed to apply is a name and address and a small fee. There are no verifications, no driving licence details, photos, etc. Nothing needed, bar your name and address, in order to apply and then be listed on the public register as a certified waste remover.
What do you want to change then?
We want to see clearer verification checks. We want to see better standards, so it's not a simple rubber stamping for fly tippers, so that we can start protecting the communities in which they are clearly harming at the moment.
Now, we approached DEFRA for a comment and they told us, we are directly supporting the Environment Agency to stop the exploitation of our waste system, including a £43 million boost to waste crime enforcement and tougher sentences for those who break the law. How effective do you think the Environment Agency is at deterring people from fly tipping?
I think at present we would like to see certainly an increase in resource. That's really reassuring to hear. But actually we want to ensure that there's a better joined up approach so that legitimate businesses can actually dispose of their waste in a better way without criminals exposing them. I mean, reforming waste regulation is absolutely essential if we are serious about protecting the countryside and the rural areas which we all love.
DEFRA also said that they've got a new waste crime action plan, and they say that sends a clear message: dump illegally and you will face the full consequences. I mean, do you think the consequences are enough to actually put people off?
So we have been pleased to see that there has been an increase in securing better sentencing and strengthening of powers when it comes to enforcing fly tipping. But we still want to see penalties that reflect the seriousness of this crime. So at the moment, the fixed penalty notices aren't enough. They're certainly not adequate enough as a deterrent for organised gangs and for large hazardous fly tipping incidents to occur.
Anne Maidment from the CLA. Next, to the ongoing impact of the conflict in the Middle East. As we've reported on this programme, input costs for farmers, like fuel and fertiliser, have skyrocketed since the war began, with warnings of knock-on effects like rising food prices. Well, this week, farmers in Northern Ireland have been holding tractor protests and blocking traffic. They want to see more financial help as they face rising fuel costs after the government in the Republic of Ireland told farmers there that €100 million are being made available to support them. Anna asked BBC Northern Ireland's agriculture and environment correspondent Louise Cullen what help farmers south of the border are getting.
The €100 million package is specifically for farmers, agricultural contractors and fishers. Now, it covers from now up until the end of July. That coincides with peak fuel usage on farms. Roughly 120,000 farmers and 1,500 full-time contractors are eligible to be under this scheme. They'll get a support rate equivalent to about 20 cents per litre of marked gas oil, green diesel as it's called in the Republic.
I suppose farmers in Northern Ireland have been looking over the border and thinking, actually, we need help too. So what have they been doing?
Well, farmers here say that they do need support. William Irvine, who's the president of the UFU, he met politicians at Stormont to make the case on behalf of members. He said farmers were facing a very real crisis with increases in energy, fuel and fertiliser, and he warned that consumers would end up paying in the long run. He's asked parties there to sign a letter to the Prime Minister urging support. Now, we have had some protest action being taken. We've had some slow-moving convoys on some roads, tractors involved in that and so on, and that's been in Belfast, in parts of County Down and Antrim, and also in County Tyrone. Farmers there said that they're simply sick and tired of the cost of everything, that they would rather be at home working, but they felt that they had to take a stand because of these spiralling costs and the pressure it's putting them under.
Well, we've been in contact with the Treasury. We asked them whether they were taking any action helping farmers, and in a statement they said, "We are determined to help keep costs down. Red diesel continues to benefit from an 80% tax discount, saving farmers almost £300 million a year, and we are providing £11.8 billion to support farm costs." There's no similar package to the Republic of Ireland.
The First and Deputy First Ministers here in Northern Ireland, they've actually written to the Prime Minister themselves calling for the government to intervene on these rising costs. The Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs here, Minister Andrew Muir, he said he would continue to engage with the Ulster Farmers Union in support of their case for new and additional assistance from the UK government. But this crisis that they say they're facing, well, it shows no real signs of abating, and the calls for support are only going to get louder.
Louise Cullen there. Well, there is another fossil fuel-based product that farmers will be needing soon, which will also be affected by the Middle East conflict: plastic wrapping for silage bales. Tractors are already out in fields cutting grass to make silage. Now, every year, thousands of tonnes of plastic foam is used to wrap the cut-up grass so it can be used for animal feed throughout the year. Mole Valley Farmers, one of the UK's leading agricultural supply businesses, says they've seen the prices of plastic wrapping increase since the outbreak of the war. Anna spoke to their CEO, Jack Cordery.
What we've seen on the back of the war in Iran is rising fuel costs, the feedstock for polymer production that have risen something in the order of 40%, and that is feeding its way through. The forecast at this stage is for stretch pricing to be up by somewhere between 25 and 40%. We've been quite fortunate insofar as we've been able to build inventory of product, but inevitably that will run out at some stage throughout the season.
Farmers didn't always use plastic, did they? And there are non-plastic alternatives. So why not learn from before we had plastic?
What we have discovered over the years with the advances in the technology is that the ensiling of bales in particular has been hugely advanced through the use of crop plastics. And clearly, in a year like this, if the availability is going to be less, the worry is people will use less on each bale, and that will increase the amount of spoilage that they can get.
Can we make our own plastic wrap instead of importing it?
One of the challenges we have is the production process is clearly the same, whether it's made in Europe or made in the UK, and it is a very high energy intensive process. And the cost of energy in the UK is, as we know, higher than in Europe. So it's really a case of economics, and there is some production in the UK for sure. However, the economics of it state that it is cheaper to make it elsewhere, as in a number of industries within the UK.
Although I can probably hear people shouting at the radio, look, we throw away an awful lot of plastic. Could we not have a system where we use our own plastic waste to make plastic wrapping for silage?
This is what the industry is doing through an association called APE, Agricultural Plastics. And what they are trying to do is to encourage the use of recycled material back into crop packaging and other uses, because we recognise how important it is to be recycling this product.
What can farmers do? Is there anything they can do now?
Get the product on farm for when the weather breaks, they can get on and silage. This is an inevitability, I'm afraid, at the moment, that prices are going to remain firm for the remainder of this season.
Jack Cordery from Mole Valley Farmers. This week marked 75 years of Britain's national parks, with the first, the Peak District, opening back in April 1951. Well, on our sister programme, Farming Today, our reporters have been sending us postcards from parks around the country, telling the stories of the people and the landscapes of these special places. Well, since the Peak District was the first, that's where we'll start. Local people have been a huge part of the Peak District Park ever since it was established, thanks to a mass trespass on Kinder Scout. They're still integral to the place today. Nina Pullman has been to meet a group of volunteers as they build an accessible pond dipping deck to help more visitors enjoy the park's beauty.
Wow.
There's four of them.
4 or 5. That's amazing. The sound of mating frogs.
Yeah.
I guess this is why you have a pond dipping platform,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah. Yes.
Does it make all the hard work worth it?
Yeah, absolutely. This is what it's for.
I'm Derek McCann. I'm a volunteer leader for the Peak Park Conservation Volunteers, and we're currently at Brunts Barn in the Woodland Garden.
Which is in Padley, close to Grinderford, the village of Grinderford, and it's a beautiful day. One of the best days of the year so far, I would say.
I would, exactly. Blue sky, hardly a cloud to be seen, and it's sunny and warm. Morning. You all right?
Hi.
I'm new to this project, so I just do what is told.
We're going to be working on that deck down there.
Do we heading that way?
Yeah. So what we've got to do today, we're going to be building that deck,
Yep.
the framework, then decking it, and putting the handrails in.
Okay, that's fine.
And then we're going to have lunch.
Yeah, and then go home. My name's Yi Wang.
Where do you live? Where do you come from?
Nottingham.
Nottingham. So
Yeah.
how long does it take you to get here?
It's about an hour, just over an hour. So I do most patrols because I love hiking. Yeah, so that is really good combination of for doing something for the park and doing something for myself, with the additional angle of benefit for other people as well.
How's it going over here?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's good fun to do some maths.
It looks great. So who are the main users of this site then?
There's 3 groups that we currently have that have got special needs. They're not all wheelchair users, but some of them are. So this is a pond dipping deck, so it overhangs that pond. What's
your background then? Have you got background in kind of woodwork?
No, I used to work in insurance.
Oh, right, that's quite a turnaround. Yeah. So how did you end up doing this?
We just volunteered as individuals, and then because I've always lived in Sheffield, I've been coming out here for 40 years, and it was just like, I'm now retired. Instead of just walking, let's do something else, you know.
So I gather 11 o'clock is quite an important time. What happens now?
The manager's meant to go and put a kettle on, and you're keeping me back from my one job. Right, who am I making tea for then, Tim?
That sounds good, yeah.
Just put cattle on there. I'm Dave Cramp and I'm the volunteering manager for the Peak District National Park.
And how important is it to the Peak District at the moment that you have this volunteer team? Because I know it's been a really tough climate for national parks in terms of funding.
The volunteers were the heart of the national park when the national parks first started, really. It has been a tough period. I don't think anyone can deny that it's been a tough period. What's really nice is that the volunteers are always positive. If they didn't want to come, they wouldn't come. So sometimes when the staff are feeling a bit like that's another meeting that hasn't gone well, there's more issues around, if you start working with the volunteers, they pick them up. So the volunteers are really important in a way to the staff as well as to the project and the whole of the national park.
That report from Nina Pullman in the Peak District. Well, now to the Black Mountains and the Bannau Brycheiniog National Park, once known as the Brecon Beacons in Wales. While perhaps most famous for its mountains and forests, Bannau Brycheiniog is also home to thousands of hectares of peatland, which is currently being restored as part of a conservation project. Marie-Claire Carey-Jones met Richard Ball from the National Park Authority and local farmer Jeff Gwilym to find out more.
It's incredibly windy where we walk now, but the views are incredible.
This is Pennegadavawr just behind us and Weinbach in front of us. And you'll see later, how badly eroded it was. But our first thing to do was really put a path in to stop people walking all over the place. Difference it's made has been immense.
And Jeff, what sort of a difference do things like that make to you when you're grazing your animals up here?
Before the path went in, there was so much erosion and people pressure with their feet, as when you walk in and it gets muddy, they walk to the side, and then it gets muddy, they walk to the side, and the path was sort of about 50 metres wide. Whereas now, since they've done the path works, it's a lot easier when you come in with the bike to get the sheep, to follow the path, and makes it very easy and quick to get from one area to another.
So there seems to be a shelf there in the landscape. What are we looking at?
Well, we always know them as rubbing points. Sheep, when they get a bit itchy on the changing the weather or whatever, and start rubbing on it, and that helps with the erosion. And really,
yeah, we call that a peat hag. So it's like a peat cliff almost. Wind will dry them in the sun, the sun dries them in the summer, and then peat blows away, and in the winter the water gets into it and washes it away. So we generally try to regrade them and returf them so that there's no bare peat exposed. All of this was more or less down to the bare peat. We put the path in, that's taken the trampling pressure off it. But we're trying to keep the area wet. Believe it or not, it does get really dry in the summer. And we've been doing that by various things, so timber dams, but we also use coir rolls. So we lay them on the ground in water channels, basically slow water. And we tried wool as well from local farms, and that worked really well, and it degrades slowly. One of the strange problems in the Black Mountains, and up here in particular, is there's very little sphagnum moss, which creates peat. So we've introduced sphagnum. We've got it from a local area, and you can just see over there there's some growing. We've put plugs in. We also, some of the bare ground we treat, we put a biodegradable mat down and then put heather cuttings on top, and that'll contain heather seeds, grass seeds and mosses.
And why was it so important that you did this restoration work here?
It was part of the SSSI that's in really poor condition, but it's also obviously a big carbon store. When peat's in poor condition, it emits carbon, whereas when it's in good condition, it'll sequester it, so it'll absorb it.
And Jeff, you've been involved with this project. Why did you want to be part of it?
Been interested in lots of different things other than farming, and became more closely working with the National Park, which led to working with restoration works on the peat.
And tell me a little bit about your farming side of it.
Well, we're farming about 300 acres of owned land with grazing rights on the Black Mountains, which we've always used. We've been farming in the area since about the early 1700s.
So how do you weigh up the two things then, being a farmer and ensuring you're doing your bit for climate change and doing your bit for the peatland restoration?
Well, I think as farmers, we have a responsibility to look after it and keep it in as good a condition as possible, and the works the National Park have done to retain the water on the peat bog, it keeps it damp, which in a dry time then, like a dry summer like we had last year, the moisture underground keeps the grasses growing on top of the bog, which benefits the sheep for somewhere to graze when it's dry. And I think there's a lot to be said in that.
Jeff Gwilym there in the Black Mountains. Now, many of our national parks are synonymous with upland landscapes, Dartmoor in Devon or the Lake District in Cumbria. The uplands are higher altitude areas of the country, comprising of a vast range of habitats from moorland to mountains. For people living and farming in these special places, the pressures they face are often different to other parts of the country. Well, a new independent report commissioned by the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs examines the unique challenges facing upland farmers and communities in England. The report, called Towards a Flourishing Uplands, comes from author and innovator Dr Hilary Cottam, who isn't an expert in either farming or the environment, but works with communities to transform social systems. For her report, Dr Cottam told me she spent time walking and talking in the uplands, from Devon to North Yorkshire, to find out what people really think of the current state of affairs and what they want for the future and how those visions differ.
So I suppose there's two stories there. One is this very deep division between environmentalists on the one hand and those who are kind of, shall we say, kind of more traditional farmers on the other. I was really conscious of those tensions which are in the review and which we'll kind of really be grappling with in the work going forward. But I think the other thing that's really important is that, I produced a review with 19 insights, and these are not a list of 19 things. What matters is the system and how each of these things interact with each other and can't just be tackled as a list or one-off things. And I think what's really interesting is the amount of consensus about that. It is possible to make a consensus map of the challenges that need to be held and looked at as a system.
It covers an awful lot, but you also want changes at DEFRA itself. For instance, who can get grants, or making applying for a grant or a scheme easier for someone who hasn't got a land agent to do it for them.
Yes, well, I think it's fair to say that DEFRA commissioned the review because they are very conscious of this. It's not like I've come back telling things to DEFRA that DEFRA don't know. But I think the other really important thing is that in my work, I divide between what I would call system optimization. How do we improve government systems? And every government needs to have many people working on improving the day-to-day. And then what I'm focused on, which is system change, which is how do we gear government systems, social systems for the future? And I'm in the system change. So we were very clear when we met people was, don't tell us what's wrong with the schemes today, because we know that there's lots of great people at DEFRA working on that. Let's talk about this very different era that we're in of climate change, biodiversity loss, food insecurity, acute rural poverty. We know that no systems that we set up in the 20th century, which is not a critique of DEFRA, it's a kind of general understanding, which definitely people in the uplands have, that those systems, post-war systems generally, which we're still living with, cannot grapple with these kind of much bigger system shifts that are coming at us. And so we need different ways of working, and that's what the report is exploring. And so that's not about could we make SFI better? That's about thinking completely differently about what food economies, natural economies look like that are generative for people who live in upland places.
So that's a shift then away from a sort of a top-down policy to something that's grown by people who live there. But agricultural policy has to cover lowlands and uplands and everything in between. So how does that all work in practice?
Yes. Well, I mean, people said, we want to be system makers, not system takers. It isn't one size fits all. We know this. I mean, I work on social care as well, for example. We know that one size fits no one. We need to think much more mosaically in small ways, just even in one farm, that one field might need to be treated differently from another place. And so what we're looking at is what are the policy systems that can support really deep local knowledge, can tie that local knowledge to actually far away knowledge. I mean, one of the things that I also talk about in the report is, where science is missing, new knowledge and tying that to local knowledge and then making policy from that out. Obviously, we'll be doing the work in practice, but at DEFRA, there is a board that is set up to really begin to receive that experience and think about how policy needs to change in reaction to that experience and that experimentation on the ground.
Realistically, though, you can't have a policy that treats every field differently. That's just not going to work.
No, but you can have a policy that says we want to reach these broad goals. We trust people who live in this place to know how to do that within their place and then ask them to take that forward.
Now, you're moving to phase 2 in Cumbria and Dartmoor. How long does all this take?
Well, that's a very big question. I mean, we are trying really to think about systems that were set up in the 1950s. So we could see this as work of many decades, but the work has been framed as 7 years, and the first phase 2 is set out for the next 2 years. And this isn't a sort of, pilot that will roll out. There are challenges which all these areas face. And if we work with local people, we can think about what would be the different systems that would support different work. And then those new policy systems can be available to everywhere to interpret as they like.
Dr Hilary Cottam. That's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Joe Pesey, and Farming Today this week is a BBC Audio Bristol production.